Alex, I just can't make up my mind. I need you to choose for me. So what is it? What are you gonna choose?
Magic.
Yes.
And with that, welcome to this week's episode of the 800s. I am your humble and very chilly co-host, hence the robe, Alex. And you just heard from my now magical co-host, Adam.
less chilly co-host.
And a shout out, as always, to the man with the plan behind the scenes. Alan, thank you for making this all happen. With that, why don't we just jump straight into our plugs for tonight?
Sure thing. If you joined us for our pre-prep screening, you heard some music. That was Fearless First by Incompetech. You should check out all of their music because they're awesome. Go to incompetech.filmmusic.io to listen to more. Also, we here at the 800s are big fans of audiobooks. I think we all partake in the audio genre. If you would like a chance to dip your toes into the audiobook world, you should check out Audible by Amazon. That's the audiobook platform I choose to use. If you'd like a 1-month free trial, go to dmstable.com/audible. And a quick shout out to Patreon. Patreon is how we keep the lights on here for the 800s and everything DM's Table. So if you would like to learn more, click the link below the video and go to Patreon, or more specifically, patreon.com/DM's Table. And with that, I think that's going to be all the plugs for the pre-show today.
All right, so this week on the 800s, we'll be discussing the first book of the Art of Adept series, The Choice of Magic by Michael G. Manning. In a world where magic is wielded by powerful sorcerers, feared warlocks, and academic wizards, we follow William, son of a midwife in a small village at the border between two rival kingdoms. His seemingly ordinary life is thrown to the winds after saving the life of a nobleman's daughter, and separately that of a child in his village. Both times he nearly experienced death himself, but he was saved by an old hermit who eventually decided to take William under his wing. William's heart gets him into trouble, but it also opens up a forgotten world to him, where he must choose between a normal life and magic.
That's a good intro for this book. Definitely a very good fantasy setting too for introductions. If this is your first time joining us tonight, I'll give you a quick rundown of what to expect here at the 800s. Essentially, Alex and I are going to talk back and forth about a topic or question. That topic or question will either be something we come up with or something that chat comes up with. So if you have something you'd like to discuss about the book, feel free to throw it into chat at any time, and we'll grab it and put it up for debate/discussion. And as well, while Alex and I are chatting back and forth, that's to give you guys a chance to comment in the chat, and we'll give a shout out to anybody who leaves a comment. So that's the 800s.
And as usual, just the quick warnings that this is a show geared towards adults. We do cover adult content and topics, and we do occasionally swear. We try not to rely on it too much, although there may be a bit more of it this time because of a certain goddamn character. Also, we're trying to create a fun and supportive community over here at DM's Table where everybody can feel free to share the things that they love and are passionate about without any fear of judgment or anything like that. So in sum, be nice or fuck off, please.
You're talking about the goddamn cat, right?
Yeah. Who else?
All right, with that, let's get right into it. First impressions time.
Honestly, up front, I thought it was a little bit slow to get going, but when it hit its stride, all the stuff that came before, like early on, really clicked, and it was worthwhile. Once you get to that point, I it wasn't that it wasn't interesting. It was just hard to understand why some of the stuff was there early on. But once you got to the point where it came together, you're like, oh, well, that's why. And so, like, very quickly got into a space where I was just ravenously taking this in. But, like, the first, I would say, 2 to 3 chapters are a bit, like, plotty and kind of hard to get into. But if you can make it past that, so worth it.
Yeah, definitely. V.S. Drake compares it to The Name of the Wind. I agree. It has that kind of same introductory feel of you're in some small village and you don't really know what the big scope of the world is yet, but you got this feeling of what kind of setting you're in terms of medieval society and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Personally, it's one of my favorite ways for a fantasy book to get started. Just that small town feel with you're about to experience the greater world kind of idea to it. Yeah, there was definitely a lot going on at the beginning though that was kind of like, okay, what's up here? What's this other country they're talking about, and who's the old guy in the woods? Who's the Fae? You know.
Well, I also in the beginning found myself, aside from the like main character and the two, like his mom and the two girls, like some of the characters I kind of found myself kind of mixing up a little bit. Like, well, even for the two girls, the one that he saves and the one that he doesn't, some of the stuff is a bit vague, and maybe that's because it's kind of makes sense because it's when he's much younger, doesn't remember it as well, and as we move towards like present for the main character. But I agree, that start where you live a simple life and somehow a greater perception of the world is opened up to you it's a fun way to learn about the world because you're learning about it through the eyes of the main like through the eyes of a character who is discovering it with you.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the reason I like it anyway.
So let me start with a topic here. Matt, I don't know if I want to go that broad or not. What do you think of the so? Sorry, I'm stumbling here.
That's all right.
So we're introduced to the idea that magic is somewhat of, well, wizardry is somewhat of a forgotten art, and that modern wizards are nothing akin to ancient wizards. What do you think of that idea of, or twofold, what do you think of the magic system that wizards are able to access? And two, what do you think of the idea of how the author painted the portrait of it's a forgotten art that only exists in an infant stage anymore?
Well, regression of knowledge is a pretty common topic in fantasy and sci-fi, where there was an ancient society or something, or an ancient visitor or something that had this established, really powerful, efficient version of something that is currently finding its way back there but is stuck for some reason. Whether it's because of time or because of manipulation by whomever or whatever, or the loss of something, whether it be knowledge or a power source. So I thought that was pretty common, but I thought it was handled really well in that Manning did a really good job of setting up a magic system that is used by all of the different types of magic users in different ways, in a way that was simple but clearly defined how they work. One draws power from an external pact and gives something up for it. The other enslaves elementals, and they draw power from essentially pure energy sources. And then the other is one that draws from power that is in every living thing. And that was actually something I really enjoyed, is that technically magic is a part of everything. And I really enjoyed that being the concept, because it's another thing where it's like anybody could do this with the right capacity and drive. And I think the way the Fae describe it is it's mind, spirit, and will. And if you have those three components, then anybody could be a wizard, which is kind of a cool concept, you know?
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, what was the defining factor between somebody being a wizard and not back in the day? I mean, now it's a matter of, like, do you have the money, connections, and, you know, a little bit of the sensitivity, I guess. But
yeah,
beyond that, I don't. It was really nice because it gives something special to the main character, but is not really all that special in the grand context of it could be anybody. So it kind of lets you, as a reader, kind of fit in, like, oh, this isn't a Mary Sue type of character. Like, this could have been anybody. He just happened to have this, like, lucky connection with, you know, the one guy who could teach him, you know?
Yeah.
So
I do love that moment you get later in the book where he's like, oh, Aragon didn't settle here because my mom was here. That was a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not special to this guy. It's purely coincidental that we lived close together. Sorry to interrupt you if you wanted to continue.
No, no. I was honestly thinking about exactly that. Is like, yeah, we do get a character that has, you know, elements of what you would think, given how the magic was set up, play into him potentially being a good wizard. He's observant. He is sensitive to Turin or magic in a way that not everybody is.
Yeah.
He's intelligent enough while also plainly being dumb. So
he's got high int, low whiz.
Yeah. Well, in a lot,
he's a wizard.
I don't know about the high int. I mean, that goes up as you go, but you know, it. I also like that they set it up so that the political system that exists very clearly paints a picture of why it's a lost art, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't something that was required, like, a MacGuffin to figure out, you know. It wasn't like the reason for motion in the story, which a lot of fantasy stories that use that setup do, is they rely on finding that lost knowledge or power source or whatever to be the driving force for the story. And I liked that this didn't do that, and it did a good job of taking it in a different direction.
Yeah. I especially liked the part where Aragon expressed that he hates sorcerers, and Will just kind of takes it a little bit. He's like, okay, but why? And then after Aragon's gone and he's on his own, it dawns on him that sorcery is essentially slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh, I get it. Like, he didn't just say, okay, I'm going to take the old man's word for this. He accepted it and then kept it in his mind while he's wandering around the world, and he's like, why did the old man hate sorcery? What drove him to that conclusion? Oh, it's because it's this heinous act of enslavement. Okay. Yeah, I get it. I hate sorcery too.
Yeah, I like that that was like a character development moment rather than a, here's the information and, like just taking that on just because it was said to him. Ooh, hiccups.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anyways, gonna get over here into chat a little bit. VS Drake.
While you're reading, why don't I rattle off my thoughts here real quick?
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely got strong vibes from a bunch of different sources for the magic system from this. There's a touch of D&D essence to it. There's, I'd say, a comparable feel to it to Manning's other book series, Mageborn, with obvious differences like anybody at any time could go make a deal with a demon and become a warlock and stuff like that, which was not there in his other book series.
Mm-hmm.
What I think really shined with this is the idea that you could do anything you want with magic if you try hard enough. There are spells to help you shape it in the way that you want, but at any time, Will could just get around what he needed to do by just doing wild magic, which was it's kind of a cool concept, if you ask me, where it's difficult and unrefined, but you can do it. Here's a better way if you don't want to risk it, kind of a thing.
Well, and I think that speaks to our characters' adaptability and creativity and overall how unique this magic system is, despite being clearly pulled from, as you said, things like D&D. I mean, sorcerer, wizard, warlock. My mind immediately went there as well. But this magic system is open-ended in a lot of ways, but it is also clearly defined enough to understand. It's not so out there and nebulous that it's just annoying or too mysterious, but there's just enough mystery with just enough structure to allow a combination of creativity and just general learning as you go along. And it was a pretty interesting balance, and again, it's fun to kind of discover it through a person who has to kind of worm their way through it in a very weird, non sequitur kind of way because of the circumstances of it. Between there only being one teacher of the old ways of wizardry, that teacher dying, and then having to figure out a bunch of stuff from sources that were thought lost to the world, i.e. the Fae, which is dangerous enough in and of itself. And anyways, on to what V.S. Drake was saying. I too very much loved the struggle that you mentioned between the three different factions of magic users, and the well-defined difference in morals and technique. I think that's a good way of putting it, is that each one has its different technique, a different source, and a different set of morals. And that we also learned that those morals are not as black and white as they're initially laid out, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And also love the quotes there, V.S. Drake. You don't know a goddamn thing about this world, and if you are dumb, you'll spend your whole life and die.
Yeah, I really liked that personality that the old man had, where he was kind of done with the world and was just super gruff about everything, and it was definitely something that you would expect a 500-year-old man to react like.
Well, speaking of which, why don't we just talk about that dynamic between William and his grandfather?
His greatest grandpa. Yeah, I really liked Aragon as a character. He felt like somebody who was just done with the world and didn't want to participate anymore, but he also had things that he felt like were worth living for. He was very adamant about being a good cook, which I feel like is a very important thing because food is something you can either take for granted and just eat to survive, or you can take enjoyment out of it. And he definitely honed his art over his 500 years and made it very clear that he viewed it as a purpose in life, not just something to keep him alive. I really liked his interactions with Will and his reluctance to teach because he felt like he should probably be done with the world. And I also liked that even though he was 500 some odd years old and was about to die, even though he didn't know it, he was capable of change in the limited amount of time that we had him as a character, in that he learned to accept others into his life, and he learned that there are more important things than just his own opinion and view on the world.
Oh yeah,
and he kind of starts letting people back in, I think.
And I think that's like a really good point that kind of gets lost in a lot of those teacher-student dynamics, is that the teacher is established. They are their own thing, and it's up to the main character to catch up or whatever. And It was kind of cool to see development in the teacher as well. Gave more of a sense of purpose and attachment to a character that ultimately doesn't make it through the end of the book. Also, I really liked that I didn't initially like him. I thought he was a pompous ass, and for no fucking reason. And he was, in a lot of ways, a pompous ass for no fucking reason. But, like, it was weird shifting the dynamic between, dude, he's a kid, give him a fucking break, in the beginning, to when he's finally gone and William's acting on his own. I'm like, he really is a fucking idiot, isn't he? I found myself, like, initially thinking a lot like William, and then as William goes on, I just like had Aragon's head in my voice in my head. The way he talks to William, just like a fucking dumbass. And I legitimately felt sad when he died because of like the exact point that you mentioned, is that there is development in him, and he goes from being thanks for getting that one out, Adam. Yeah. He goes from being this character that's just crotchety and kind of, honestly, it was a little bit much in the beginning because we don't have enough context for him. And I was like, this is just fucking annoying, and if I were in William's shoes, I'd want to kick him between the nuts. Not that I could, because all you would take is one green line and you'd be paralyzed, but,
Yeah. And V.S. Drake also says he liked the change in tone from Blacksmith's Son. He really liked the cursing, and the fact that that Aragon was a food snob.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was
part, and it just gets better as it goes too.
Yeah. There's something to say about giving a character a limited amount of time and making their impact feel like it lasts for the entire book.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is because Manning very specifically makes like the voice of reason in William's head, you know, essentially be be Aragon. You know, whenever whenever he knows he's doing something stupid, but he's about to do it anyway, that voice comes up. And I thought it was a smart choice for the exact reason that you mentioned. Is I felt the loss, but I never felt like he was gone from the story. You know?
Yeah.
Which is a tough thing to handle without being too heavy-handed. And I don't think Manning ended up doing that. I know we're laying a lot of praise on this book, so not to be negative, but I am curious, are there any parts of the story that you thought could have been done better?
You know, yes, and I don't know. It depends. It depends on how I'd say the rest of the series shakes up. But two things come to mind. One being the king seems unbelievably evil and cruel. Although we obviously don't have the entire story because he's a pretty late arrival in the first book. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious about the trope of evil ruler has hidden motives, that he's going to do some evil thing and get away with it because he's super powerful. It's definitely a trope that we see in books a lot, and I don't feel like there's a lot of motive expressed behind how the king behaves, especially with his mistreatment of his daughter and presumably his armed forces, but that's kind of an unknown there too. The other thing that comes to mind is I think Manning might have wrote himself into a corner a little bit by killing Aragon, because we kind of see a potential limit to how much a magic user can grow in power level based on the fact that Aragon was this wizard of old at the end of a very long and most likely extremely magically successful life, but he was felled by a Sybil crossbow bolt. I feel like that's going to be a limitation that Manning is going to have to follow for the rest of the series, is that at any given time, if a magic user screws up, they can be killed by a crossbow bolt. So it's kind of an interesting see how it shapes out weakness, because I think it's going to depend on what Manning does with it, really. But those two things come to mind.
Honestly, don't mind it as a limitation. The crossbow bolt thing, part of it was obviously foreshadowing, you know. But I think putting mortality on the table keeps wizards from being a little OP, you know, because they have essentially all the strength and none of the and more, and none of the drawbacks of the other types of magic users. And if you don't give them some kind of chink in the armor, it feels a little bit like, well, what are the stakes? You know? Now, if arrows keep being the one thing that take them down, yeah, that would be fucking stupid. But I think
Blast
I
arrows,
think
my
giving,
only weakness.
you know, it's I honestly I don't like Achilles heel stuff for characters. Like if it's broad enough to be like, if you can get past their magical, if you can get them to let their defenses down magically, wizards are squishy. you know, like and I also think it one of the things that Manning did to kind of counteract that a bit is by having William join the army, is teach, even from the early stages when Aragon's teaching him like the staff work and stuff, is realizing, yeah, there's a weakness and it does need to be addressed if you're going to live to be 500 years old.
Mm-hmm.
As far as limiting the writing, going forward, I don't know that it is necessarily the only thing that's limiting, and the thing that opens it up to interpretation for me are the congruences. What else is there out there? I mean, we know that there are fae, demons, and presumably a whole bunch of other hosts of worlds out there. So I don't know that it's necessarily limited to just those things so far. And I kind of like that that's the case. I mean, hell, we actually get shown pretty early on that being too horny can get you killed.
Oh no.
Or at least turned into a fae. Anyway. So again, I don't think it's necessarily, it could be limiting, and you are right that it depends on how Manning treats it, but I don't think it is maybe as limiting as you seem to have set it up, or maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but you're right. It is a bit of a it could potentially be a limiting factor.
I think it definitely feels like a typical D&D wizard where they wield all this ultimate offensive power but lack any sort of defense to mundane weaponry and have very low HP and can be taken down by a sword swing. Did you have any opinions about your own weaknesses in this book?
I think it's not necessarily a weakness, but I don't think that outside of the magic system and stuff, I think there wasn't necessarily the most intricate of world building. Like there are elements that I would have liked to have seen a bit more of, or possibly just having been spoiled by reading so much Brando Sando recently, who is the master of that. There are parts of it where I'm like, some stuff felt just thrown in there to be easy to deal with, like just making things that putting things in there that we would understand as readers inherently without having to actually do any work to understand them, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. It's it's just a specific choice. But one of the things I found myself wondering throughout all of this is like, what fucking relative time era are we in here? Because I'm hearing elements of stuff that feels like it is, the year between 800 and 1000, and then I hear other stuff that sounds like it's like almost the 1600s, and I'm like, I maybe that's on me for putting that on another world, especially one with magic in it, which would ultimately change how technology is developed, especially over a long period of time. But there were elements that were a bit confusing as to like what to expect of the world based on the level of technology and the way people interacted with each other and stuff. And that felt a little loosey-goosey, but I just don't. What I don't know is if that, like you said, gets developed in later books, which is fine. But for this one, there were parts of it that I was just like, I don't know how to bring this to life in my head because I'm making a lot of assumptions based on things that got put in that I'm supposed to just inherently recognize. You know? And because he's using things that I recognize as a human being, I fill in those patterns. And then when those patterns get disrupted without any sort of structure for why it's disrupted, it can be a little off kilter, or at least it was for me. But like, I'm nitpicking, honestly, when it comes to that, because it's not like it ruined the enjoyability of the book, but it did kind of take me out of it a bit sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about the world building aspect. But I would say I'd have to agree. I mean, Manning sticks to known concepts, kind of loosely, but counts, barons, dukes, kings. That's all stuff that we had in our world. He doesn't explore a whole lot about this other country that's presumably attacking for some reason, and he has yet to explore a ton of the Fey world, except for it's dangerous and there's two Fays that interact with Will quite frequently. There, in terms of world building, there's a lot that you get a glimpse at, but not fleshed out.
Mm-hmm. I think V.S. Drake put it very well. He is that Manning really leans on you, the reader, to make leaps that aren't explained directly to Will or you. Like, you're just expected to kind of fill in the gaps. And that's fine if the rest of it provides a structure for how to fill in those gaps, but sometimes that was left kind of nebulous and hard to understand. I also agree with you, V.S. Drake, that my personal opinion is that a lot of the weird space that they're in technologically and magically is because of the fall of the wizards, and how science and magic are basically held by the nobility. And, in much the same way science and technology was stifled by the church here in our world for a very long time. It was basically, if it doesn't serve the purpose of the church, then it's not
Get on out of here.
And I think it's treated the same way here, where the nobility are just like, if it doesn't serve our interests, then, you're an unlicensed wizard, Harry, or, or you're seen as like some kind of evil warlock, which we learn isn't necessarily evil in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yes, it does need to be memes now. Especially considering that that's our next book, but we'll talk more about that later. So do we have any questions from chat, or do you have another question or topic for us, Adam?
Yeah, I did have another topic. I wanted to discuss oh no, I knew what it was a second ago.
Hate that. It's like when you walk into a room and forget why you were in there.
Let's go with the let's go with the character relationship between Celine and Will. What did you think of their interactions and how they grew together?
That honestly, I think speaks to one of Manning's greatest strengths, and we saw this in The Blacksmith's Son, and he does it again with this, is Manning is very good at creating characters you can invest yourself in by tying them to each other with story threads and things that get tugged on or pull them back together or push them apart. His ability to create interesting dynamics between characters without going too far with them is one of the most enjoyable things about his writing style, to me anyway. And I like it because it is frustrating, it's adorable, it's terrible, it is all the things I felt when I was 17. And, you know, I think in their interactions, I probably heard Aragon's voice the most, like, you dumbass. But at the same time, it's believable because, like, at that age, I made the same dumb statements. And it's, you know, it was something I honestly enjoyed, whether or not you care about the romantic aspect of it. I thought it was well written and believable. I do like that there's a character that can get the upper hand on the main character, whether that's emotionally or not, or like technically speaking, and she happens to be both in a lot of ways. And, you know, while he has a particular skill that sets him apart, she has her own. And I also like the tension that he created with their different types of magic, you know, the inherent dislike between true wizards and sorcerers. And yeah, that's a great way of putting it, Via Straight. She puts them in check in many ways. And I think the fact that they check and balance each other and the fact that they frustrate each other so much is believable, and it's a fun dynamic to read.
Yeah. They're I think in terms of character background, they're pretty perfect foils for each other. Because you have Celine, the rich sorceress who went to school and is very well accomplished at magic, can do things that other magic users can't do because she has trained and trained and trained. And then you have Will, who until extremely recently had never practiced magic, came from a very poor background, but based on raw talent alone, can do things that Celine can't.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say raw talent, but like talent definitely plays into it. But I catch your meaning
because of the ancient trick, he can do things she can't.
Well, and he also just has that element of his perspective on the world has given him experiences that she never could. Like his ability to roam the wilderness and shit for like most of his life, you know, what his access to things to like it's the Fey realm that didn't have to do with his wizard trick. I mean, like anybody could have felt plants that were unedible if you have a magic sense, apparently, because he has that before he starts trading with his grandpa, where he feels things to a certain extent, you know. But my guess is his sensitivity has to come.
Sorry, Via Strict, his dumb, stupid luck.
Actually, yeah, that is definitely an element of it for sure. Is, you know, they both have insane luck, but in two very different ways.
Yeah.
One.
I love that scene in the army camp when Celine confronts Will about sneaking into her tent, and she's all like, "I have this intricate spell, and I know for sure it was you that was in my tent." He's all like, "Nah, no, you don't know that. Oh, shoot, you can do that with magic? Damn!" And she's all like, "How'd you get in my tent?" And he's all like, "I don't know, I just touched it and then I walked in."
Well, yeah, and I like that she is smart enough to like not give up at the first attempt to like trick him into telling the truth too, which happens so often like in movies and books where they're like, oh damn, my first attempt was foiled. Well, I guess I can't crack you. But she continues to give yeah, such a great lawyer. But she continues to like do something smart, and that's like take what she has, which is an intricate knowledge of magic, and use it to test whether or not, you know, he has certain abilities or sight, you know, by using this intricate knowledge. And I really enjoy the fact that she is as smart as he is dumb sometimes. And you know, like you said, a lot of that has to do with her being his foil, having had a lot of training, but she's also like an intelligent character. So it doesn't feel like it's unearned or like it's just like hand waved because she is royalty, you know.
Yeah.
And she obviously shows competency when they go and attack the supplies and stuff, the supply depots.
Yeah, definitely. She takes down her own fair share of militant other siders.
You
I'd be curious to see if that storyline about the other country attacking continues in future novels. Obviously, at the end of it, Will kind of gets pulled back from the front lines to the capital city, and we're presuming that he's not returning there anytime soon. But it's interesting to see the different ways magic can be used in the army as a support weapon.
know.
compared to individual use, like what Celine does inside the army camp and wandering the wilderness and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, it's the two different styles of implementation, though. That wild magic that is more like augmentation versus spell magic, which is constructing something that wasn't there before, effectively. You know, just
Yeah.
And it'll be really what it makes me fascinated to know is more about her part of it, because we only get the first like initial glimpses into it. But I also want to know what are the limits of what he can do from his end with the wild magic. And that's what I love about this magic system, kind of like being bigger than we know, but still being well defined within what we do know well enough anyway, where, you know, I understand it. I'm not grasping at straws. You know, it's not too intricate, but it's not too simple either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, VS Drake, is it's really cool that like simple stuff can have powerful effects depending on how it's used as well. Again, that ability to use creativity. I know we got away from the dynamic between the two of those characters, but it's hard not to talk about them without talking about the different ways that they experience magic, because that's a part of their dynamic. And I think it's one of the things I really liked about that is the fact that it makes sense, because magic permeates everything. It has to be a part of how they interact with each other to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless you're tiny. And then magic isn't real, it's just stories they tell.
Oh shit, how'd you do that?
Okay, so then why don't we talk about that? Who were some of your favorite side characters and why?
Yeah. I really liked the thief conscript that was an absolute a-hole in jail.
David?
I forget what his name was.
I think it's David. David the Dick. It was because it was David, Sven, and Tiny, I think, right?
Yeah. Via Strike's having a whole side convo with himself over there, having a little schizophrenia break from the
We're paying attention to you, Via Strike. We are here to help.
But I really liked how Manning turned him from a huge douche who was just, a typical cut purse who didn't care about anybody but himself, and then he joins the army and learns to essentially be part of a team and belong to a group instead of just fending it out for himself. I thought it was a cool little growth aspect that he didn't have to throw in there, but he decided to.
Mm-hmm.
Just tiny little gleam of what separates a good author from a bad author is one that cares about those side details and side characters.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I think, I just saw what VS Drake put in there. Yeah, is it does feel kind of like a D&D party where circumstance brought them together and their bits of expertise kind of balance each other out. Before William has any sort of physical strength, he's got Tiny there to help him out. I think that the change that comes to David has a lot to do with William himself, and good side characters both are affected by the main character and affect the main character. They're not just set pieces, like you were describing. They are dynamic characters who influence each other. Tiny learns about a greater world of magic and finds his first friend, which is like, I don't know about you, but I audibly went, "Oh," when he was like, "You're my first friend."
Yeah.
And David, like you said, goes from being a cut purse, just like a random asshole, to being a dude who, is kind of self-involved, but ultimately actually gives a shit about somebody else. But I think it also speaks to this aspect of William, is that he has the personality that can better people. And so, yeah, but he is our asshole now. And in general, Manning, I think that's Manning's greatest strength in general in his writing, is his ability, the way he treats his characters with care, and their dynamics as well. That's the strongest part of his writing, and for me, that can be as much of a driving force as world building. And I think it gets left to the side a lot in fantasy and sci-fi, or at least to the exception of world building. World building is places like primary, character relationships are secondary, and I think they're both fairly equal, at least personally. You can't have one entirely without the other, because then your story would suck. But if you can find a balance, it's great. And I think, as I would go as far as to say, as good as Brandon Sanderson is at world building, Michael G. Manning is at character building. Now, if we could only combine them, and I don't want to do too much comparing with other authors, but we've pretty well set a bar for our high end, our god tier of world building has been Brandon Sanderson, at least as far as we've experienced in this show. So far, as fantasy character building goes, I would put Michael G. Manning on that same tier for me personally. There weren't any characters that I felt were a waste of time, which is a lot considering how many characters were in this book.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, my favorite side character was I'm going to leave Tiny aside because I'll let V.S. Drake claim him. It was the goddamn cat.
The goddamn cat.
Well, like, what I really like about the goddamn cat is, like, it's a character that just, like, out of nowhere you kind of, like, set him aside. Like, I thought that was going to be the first character that was just like, oh, it was introduced, it's just the grandpa messing with him or something like that. But no, what that cat did is it becomes a window into a greater world, and it opens up the eyes of our character to something bigger without forcing him to go there, Like, he learns just enough to interact with it, but it does open the eyes of the character to something bigger. And it also clearly has more of a story to be told. Like, my favorite little bit is that exchange between him, the goddamn cat, and Celine. Is the fact that he could fucking talk. I had the same reaction that William did. It was like, you can fucking talk?
This whole goddamn time, and you could talk?
I mean, I kind of had an inkling because Aragon does kind of like talk to him like at the beginning, talk to the goddamn cat at the beginning. But I think there's a lot more there. It's a character that I'm curious about, but it also, I don't know, it was just, it was the impetus for a bunch of interesting interactions. And, like, we kind of get that a bit with the Fae, but,
I really like that scene where the goddamn cat potentially might have murdered a deer for the family.
Maybe. It had claw marks.
Yeah, but they're like, those are some really big claw marks, and that's a really tiny cat. But who else could it be?
Yeah. And I like, and even how the Fae react to him, like, this character clearly has like a lot going on. Apparently it's immortal. Good idea, V.S. Drake. Let's get into a different question before we get in, because we could talk all day about the characters, but last question. So V.S. Drake says, what do you think about Will's interactions with the Fae? Why don't you go ahead and start us off, Adam?
Yeah, I think based on his interactions so far in book one, I think we're heading towards. I get that feeling that the Fae are trying to set him up for like a long con sort of scenario, because Aragon keeps saying like, "Oh, don't trust the Fae; they'll fuck you over." But Will keeps going, "Well, they've always been nice when I talk to them, and they seem like they're okay to me." And his aunt essentially gives him 3 unbound favors for free. Like, feels awfully intentional, and it just feels like to me that like they were waiting for Aragon to take on a student, and at some point they're going to do something to break free of their bonds to the human realm. And I don't know, it's interesting to hear Aragon's warnings about them, and see Will and his actions towards them kind of not match up to what Aragon is saying.
Yeah,
That's
I think part of it is we're going to learn a bit more about the nature of the Fae and the inhabitants of other realms themselves. I think they are trying to play him because that is their nature as Fae. But the question is will William fall for it? And if he does, how does he respond to it? I don't want to speculate too much on other books, but one of the things that I found interesting in this one is they did a really good job of creating a version of the Fae that fits a pretty modern idea of what Fae are like, in that they are bound by rules and the seeking of pleasure and passion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, I agree with you straight. They were written very well to be this like other, like you would tell that they were otherworldly, like just from every bit of the description, the way they interact with things. I'm curious to see if there is more to be known about Aisling in particular, and if there's more to be known about humans that turn Fae. You know, do they on some level keep some of their spirit or will or something? You know, we know that spirit mind, and will are the three things that make up all living beings. Is there any ember of that gets left? And does Will use that to discover something bigger? Or is it going to be exactly what you said, where drama's created, where they exploit him? My guess is if they exploit him, it's going to have something to do with whatever the fuck that promise was, where they keep trying to let him give them permission to kill humans.
Yeah. I think a common theme we continue to see in this book is there are people who know things and they are confident in their knowledge, and here comes Will, who knows nothing and figures things out based on his observations. And sometimes the things he figures out, other people think are impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But he's like, well, look, I can do it. So it'll be interesting to see which side the Fae come out on, Will's side or Aragon's side, or a third
will
side.
It be I was going to say, will it be a combination of both? Will he forge something entirely new? Well, there's something to be said for the so dumb they're genius is, what is it? You can't fill a cup that's already full.
Yeah.
You know, so when people have this idea in their mind and they come to it with a full cup, trying to change what's in there, you have to completely get rid of what's in there before you can have something new. But if you come with an empty cup, it can be filled with whatever is given to you. You know, so it's just a matter of how will that manifest. And I think there is going to be something he does that's dumb where they exploit it. It's probably just going to be how it is, because that's our William. That's our dumbass. Yeah. But you know, I enjoyed the interactions because there's so much possibility there, and it creates drama by the very nature of the Fae and the nature of, especially because of the nature of our main character, which is it's not too predictable, but it's predictable enough to be able to speculate on, which is fun. It's fun to read.
Yeah. I think Manning gave us a lot to think about too in terms of fantasy world exposure, because we've got, you know, three types of magic users between the wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks. You've got the Fae, you've got trolls in this other dimension. Mm-hmm. You've got a bunch of different ideas in terms of willpower and raw magic and spells. You know, there's a lot of different facets to the magic in the world. It's kind of neat to see the different meshings of those different options that Manning created in this book.
Sorry, I was listening, and I I completely agree that it is fascinating to like think about and speculate on, but also having characters and story that keeps you in the story itself without wandering too far afield, because you know that if you read the story, you're going to get little tidbits and you'll have more to speculate on, and it drives the curiosity as well. But I was laughing because V.S. Drake, yeah, I want to see the dwarves too. I'm secretly hoping that like at some point in the series, he basically becomes a plane hopper and goes to different worlds, and we get to experience those worlds as well, and maybe get a better understanding of like Turin itself and how that somehow apparently transcends planes.
Yeah.
You know, dope as fuck. Sorry. It's something that's an inside joke with a different friend of mine. But I won't get into that on this channel. I just said it out of habit. I don't know if it goes beyond book 5 because I think book 5 was just released in like May. So,
yeah,
I'm personally only like 3/4 of the way through book 2. But I will most assuredly be going through book 5 unless this really falls apart at some point, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, guess we'll
Why
see.
don't we do one quick, before we do final thoughts, let's do a quick speculation round. Like predictions.
Oh yeah, real quick. Book 5, the audiobook was released this week.
Oh dang!
So very new, very new. Predictions are kind of hard. That's what you said, right? You wanted to talk predictions.
Yeah, if you have like one or two, it doesn't need to be like predictions on everything, but if there's like a theory you have or something in particular that stood out to you that you want to share with the world.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is predictions for me are kind of hard because I am halfway through book 3 personally. So
you cheating son of a bitch.
I even took a break in there, okay? But I also, yeah, I like 10 minutes, 15, real quick breather. No, I finished book 1 back when we did Warbreaker, so I think I've had a little bit extra time to get ahead. But for me, what I really want to see is what the king is hiding. We know he's got to be hiding something. He seems to have unimaginable control over his daughter because he is able to summon her.
Yeah, which is something we don't see anywhere else.
Yeah. And it seems like he's up to something because he knows something about Will and isn't all that surprised that Will can do magic in extremely powerful ways when the wizards he knows shouldn't do magic in extremely powerful ways because it would cost them literally their life. So I'm really curious where the king is going to go, and I think V.S. Drake mentioned it earlier. I think it was one of you, either you or V.S. Drake mentioned.
It was V.S. Drake. I know what comment you're talking about, but yeah, go ahead.
Where he might have been one of Aragon's previous students. And what my prediction is that he is secretly extremely old and has somehow figured out how to sap life from either elementals or other sorcerers / wizards to remain alive and king for many, many generations.
All right. I actually have a similar theory. Like, we all are clearly fascinated by this character because he's just too fucked up to not be something big.
Yeah.
I think my prediction is that he is a creature from another plane. I don't know which one. I don't think he's Fey because they diminish in power when they leave the Fey realm, and they hate sorcerers too.
Yeah.
I don't. So I just think he's some kind of creature from another plane. I don't know what kind. I think whatever it is probably has longevity as a part of its either natural life cycle um, or it came to this plane and this could be a double thing. It could have come to this plane, somehow disguised itself, learned magic from Aragorn, or at least learned the longevity, whatever the case. Uh, I agree. I think he's older than he seems to let on. Um, and I think that, but my personal prediction is that he's not of this world, or at least of Will's world, anyway.
Yeah. We do know elves exist too.
Yeah. So elves, maybe, apparently they don't like sorcerers either. So, but it could be, he could be an outcast. He could be an outcast elf too. We don't know that. Like, whatever the case may be, my prediction, just for some character from a different world, and I don't think it, and I'm reasonably certain it's not a Fae. And I have an inkling that it's connected to the goddamn cat in some way, other than that they both are clearly from another world. Or at least the goddamn cat's clearly from another world. I think my other major prediction is I think elementals are used by capturing capturing souls of other beings, which is why it's so abhorrent. But that's just my prediction.
I'm pretty sure Will figures out what elementals are in book 1.
I don't think he figures out what they are. He just figures out that they're intelligent enough to, like, he figures out that they feel like they have feelings and that they are intelligent. I don't think he figures out what they are, just that they are more than just pure energy. They are beings of some kind. And I think it's probably some fucked up, you've got to like rend the soul or something from the body and entrap it or something like that. Something that's like really brutal to do, and then enslave it.
Oh, don't Google it. There's immediate spoils in book 5, so don't Google it.
Oops. All right, those are my predictions. So why don't we get into final thoughts here?
Yeah. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It isn't. Yeah, you're welcome, Via Streak. I stopped reading when I realized that it was about book 5. But I thoroughly enjoyed the experience of the characters in this book, and I agree with what you said earlier, Alex, about Manning's strong suit being the characters. I felt like the plot was less strong as the characters. There was definitely a plot there, but it felt kind of meandering, kind of like, oh, let's just explore the world and see where it takes us. Oh yeah, there's this kingdom going on and they're invading. But it felt kind of like the main plot was more of a background plot, and that does kind of come to fruition when Will makes it to the capital and yeah, now there's this evil king going on and doing bad stuff. So maybe that's the main plot. And, um, I feel like that wasn't as strong as the characters, but it didn't necessarily take away from the book as a whole. So overall, I'd say I enjoyed it. The ending was kind of meh. I kept waiting for Will to be like awarded rewards for murdering the entire evil army, but that never really came to fruition. And the late entrance of the king felt kind of like, oh, what's going on here? Oh, it's the end of the book. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed it and would definitely recommend.
I am going to agree with you on pretty much all points. I think plot was a bit secondary to characters, but even the plot I thought was good enough considering how good the character work was, because a lot of this felt foundational to furthering like some kind of overarching plot, and there is enough of a plot in this one to get you from beginning to end, and there's enough of an overarching question behind everything for me to say, okay, there was something else going on that's going to keep me reading through other books. So, and I think that when you have both of those things, it's okay to have maybe not as much plot, at least for me, because it's like, awesome, I've got great characters that have set me up for what I hope will be a more thorough plot exploration in later books. And there was enough plot in this one that I understood it, that I didn't feel like it was missing entirely. I honestly had a lot of fun reading this one. I went right into reading the second one, and it's probably only the third book this year that had that compulsion for me where I was like, I immediately, not just I want to read the next book, but I immediately need to read the next book. You know? Which I think speaks really to you. You have to have a certain kind of writing style. You know, as much as we love Brandon Sanderson, for me, I need a break in between because there's a lot there. Now, granted that what I'm reading is probably 2 of these books, so we'll see how I feel after I finish book 2 of this one. But you know, I think it takes a lot of skill to create the kind of book that has you on the edge of your seat wishing for the next one. Like, honestly, if I had to have waited for the second book, I would have been driven bonkers.
Hopefully it resolves around book 5 then.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to resolve by then, but there were just like a couple little things, and maybe I need to stop reading the epilogues, but as soon as I read the epilogue, I was like, I must know what happens next. Yeah, overall, I thought it was a good departure in tone from his other books, so it didn't feel like I was reading just like Michael G. Manning picked a different setting. You know, like it was a tone shift, there's a character shift. The magic system has its own unique flavor to it. It's a great hook book.
Yeah.
Not a
I definitely agree with that. Hook book being that you're now invested in the series. I definitely agree with Via Strike there.
Yeah. Yeah. Via Strike, you do bring up a good point. There are a lot of hints of some traumatic stuff, and that's something we didn't really talk about a lot, and maybe we should get better about that as we go forward, about putting that up front. I think that those scenes were treated with care. I would say, as I recommend this to anybody, if you have issues with I would say PTSD, and whether it is from sexual assault or even from combat, from a combat perspective, there's some very detailed accounts of stuff that could be as well. But even so, I thought those moments were treated with care. You have a character who treats it with care, or with caring, and I thought it was pretty well handled. And it's not anything I would say stay away from this, but just be aware of it. And I would absolutely recommend this book, like, to anyone who's willing to approach fantasy at all.
Yeah, obviously it's probably a little late now because we're in the you've already read this assumption phase, but book 2 and 3 also have kind of more strongly triggery moments in them, just to be aware of. Book 2 does have a straight up rape incident, and book 3 has a torture incident. So if those are things that you don't want to read about, I would suggest you end your Art of the Adept here.
Yep. It's still something I think with preparation most people could handle, though, because again, it is treated with a certain level of care in the context of the story. But if it's something you can't handle,
not that we're assuming what people can and can't handle, just
like
we're just notifying that these things exist in the next book as well.
My point was just, I don't think it is just thrown in there to be thrown in there, or to be edgy. Like, it serves a purpose in the story, and if you're okay with that, then if it makes a difference for you, then it's something to be noted. But otherwise, approach with caution if you have those issues. And if you do, like Alan just said, please let us know if you do have trigger warnings for books that you suggest, or if there are things that you think we could address better. Feel free to reach out to us. So we'd love to learn more about what we can do to address these things in ways that make everybody who interacts with DM's table feel as welcome as possible and safe as possible.
Yeah.
All right, so I think now is about the time to wrap up.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just talking through some things real quick. So first off, special shout out to Brendan P from YouTube. Brendan let us know about this book series by Manning. Thank you, Brendan, for the recommendation to add this to our list. It was a really good read. I think we all enjoyed it here at the 800s. And it was surprising to me because I didn't even know this book series existed by Manning, and Manning is one of my preferred authors. I really like his other series, series of series, because he's got a couple series in the same universe for Mageborn. So thank you for throwing that out there into the 800 verse and getting it on our radar. It was a really good book. In terms of next time, so this is our last bi-weekly 800s. We're going to start doing these once a month now. Starting on January 28th, we're going to be reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Oldie but goodie. I think we've all read that before here, but we'll destroy it, so to speak, in terms of our adult minds instead of our child minds when we first experienced Harry Potter.
Yeah.
After that, for February 25, we're going to be doing How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. And I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly. That is how I am hoping it's pronounced, but if not, I apologize. That is going to be a new book for me, so excited to get another new book on the 800s for me. I don't know if, Alex, if you've read that one before or not.
I have not. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I think you said it right. I know Sequoia, unless there's any... I don't know any other pronunciation of that, and so the first name I would assume is correct. The last name, Nagamatsu sounds right, but feel free to correct us if you have any knowledge to the contrary.
Yeah.
As Adam said, when we go through Harry Potter, it'll be nice to kind of go back with an objective view. We did talk about that a little bit on our Christmas specials. So if you want to see that, it'll be released to our Patreon holders as of December 25th. That is Christmas Day. So if you want to join us for a little holiday cheer, you can join us on Patreon. And patrons will get a first crack at that. Otherwise, it will be released after the New Year's to anybody because it will be posted on our YouTube. Which Adam will tell you about a little bit later. Our next book, we're going to have a little bit of time before we actually have our vote ready. Probably going to announce it somewhere around the new year. So that gives you time to give us suggestions, whether it's a book that you're gifted or something that comes up while you get some holiday reading done. Let us know if there's anything that you would like to suggest. But our next book is going to be all the way out in March, and spring will have sprung when we get there. So our theme for that is going to be nature. So bring us all of your nature-themed books, things that center around the natural world. You can interpret that as you will. And if there's anything you think fits the bill for that, send us your Spring Has Sprung book.
Clear out the clear the air with a nice spring book.
Yep.
All right, cool. Here's some other plugs for you guys. DMstable.com is where you can find out all information about the 800s and every other project that we do here at DM's Table. That's the last I'm going to do of this weird announcer voice. We also have an Etsy page. You can get to that at dmstable.com/Etsy. It's primarily some nerd culture 3D prints. It's very cool. You should definitely check that out. We post all of our videos, the 800s and other projects, on YouTube. You should check out YouTube. The link is below the video as well. Patreon.com is where you go to become a super fan of the 800s and the DM's Table. Go to patreon.com/DM's Table to join our list of patrons. Our lowest tier is only $2, so it's not going to break the bank. If you would like to reach out to us on our socials, we have a Facebook and Twitter page at The DM's Table for Facebook and at DM's Table for Twitter. And if you would like a more personal environment to discuss things with us, we have a Discord channel where we talk all things nerdy. If you would like to join us on Discord, feel free to hit us up on our socials and we'll give you the link. And yeah, I think that's it for plugs.
Yep, that should be it for us for the year. Also, quick reminder, as of the new year, we will be moving to our new one book a month format, both to make room for other types of content and so that we don't outpace ourselves and you as our viewers with the amount of books that we do. We will still be reading other books and we'll have other ways to interact through the different socials and stuff that Adam just mentioned, so keep that in mind. And if you have any suggestions for us, things that you like that are new that popped up, or things that you don't like that we try out, just please let us know.
Yeah, we're always open to some feedback, and we're really excited to focus more on what we can do to better the show instead of just throwing books out there every other week. So
exactly. With that, so I think we can wrap it up for tonight. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Happy holidays, everybody, regardless of what you celebrate or don't. And since we won't see you before then, Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy holidays, guys, and I hope you stay safe during your travels and watch out for snow.
Yep. We'll see you next year and next book.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. See you next book.